growing up and knowing I was adopted, I actually didn't really have a problem with it. I think it's definitely harder more for my biological family in China. When I think about the one-child policy and the impact, I think it's a lot harder for the mothers that had to give up their children, and for the parents that know every single day that their child is out there in the world and they didn't really have a choice.
Can you tell me your name and pronouns?
My name is Chloe Snook and my pronouns are she, her.
Where are you from and how do you identify culturally?
So I was born in China and then I was raised in Minnesota, and the past 8 years I've been living in Florida. I'd say I definitely identify as an Asian American specifically. I think the adoptee experience is really complex. So sometimes I feel more American, sometimes I feel more Asian, or something a little bit in between. So.
What was it like growing up knowing you were adopted from China?
So I often get asked how I found out I was adopted. I always knew I was adopted. So, my parents always had little storybooks that they read to me before bed, and those were all adoption stories and based on Chinese adoption. So, they were these little fairy tales and stuff, or about, one of my favorites was A Mother for Choco, and it was about, how you actually don't have to look like your parents and stuff, and it was an adoption story. But growing up and knowing I was adopted, I actually didn't really have a problem with it. A lot of people think that I might be sad about it or the situation is sad. And I think though the situation surrounding my birth is definitely on the harder side, I think it's definitely harder more for my biological family in China. I don't know them, but I would assume that the circumstances are quite hard. But for me, I'm hey, I'm in America. I've got all these opportunities, and I'm quite happy about that. So.
Can you tell us what you know about the one-child policy in China?
Yeah, so the one-child policy, obviously, it was enforced in 1979, and they said only one child per family. And because of that, a lot of people were like, well, if we're only going to have one child, we're going to have it be a son. Because daughters, they get married off, they don't carry on the family name. You have to give a dowry to traditionally in Chinese culture. So the women were just kind of seen as worthless. So they'd either find out the gender before and then have an abortion because they knew it was a girl, and they actually outlawed having ultrasounds where you can tell the gender, because so many people were aborting their babies just because on the basis of their gender. Later on, there were more infanticides. You even have the instances of trafficking, kidnappings, forced sterilizations, and forced abortions. So there's a lot of corruption under the policy. And then about 160,000 baby girls were adopted outside of China and internationally. So, yeah.
Wow, how does all of that information make you feel?
I think knowing that it's very heavy knowledge, and I feel like it's something that more people should know. A lot of Chinese people either don't know the magnitude of it because China doesn't want them to know. And then also a lot of Americans are like, well, it's not happening in the West, so it doesn't matter. But I think this kind of speaks to a larger issue of, women and girls not being valued just on the basis of their gender. And to me, that really inspires me to make the work I do. work about injustices around the world. I think when I think about the one-child policy and the impact, I think it's a lot harder for the mothers that had to give up their children, and for the parents that like know every single day that their child is out there in the world and they didn't really have a choice and whether or not they could keep it or not. So, and I think that is really tragic.
How has knowing that you are adopted as a result of the one-child policy, how has that affected your identity as a Chinese American?
So the Chinese adoptee identity is like a little bit of an identity crisis. It's been a lifetime of trying to figure things out. So whereas like a lot of Asian Americans, they grew up with Asian culture at home, but they're also navigating this American lifestyle. I personally was raised by just white parents, and most Chinese adoptees are raised primarily by non-Asian families. And so because of that, a lot of times this Asian culture is super duper foreign to us. Even if you grow up half white, half Asian, you still have an Asian parent to sort of guide you through that culture. But I know, speaking for some of my sisters in my group, they feel no attachment to Chinese culture. In fact, they like feel very much like a white person because they were raised that way. They grew up that way. They really have no connection to China. And it's really not their fault either. It's just how they grew up, you know? So I had something similar, but I've spent a lot of time trying to reconnect with my culture. And with that, I've been met with a lot of expectations for me to be more Asian than I am, to know more things about Asian culture than I actually do, just on the basis of how I look. Now, that's not to say that I'm not Asian either. Obviously, I look very Asian, so I have the experiences of experiencing racism and bullying and things like that. It's just when it comes to like the more cultural side of things of like, oh, when I was growing up, I used to watch these certain TV shows, or I used to eat my mom's dishes like this or something like that. My memories are more like, oh, my favorite family dish is German potato salad. So, yeah, it can be really confusing to navigate. And Chinese adoptees still experience the you're not Asian enough or you're too Asian kind of paradox. But it's just a little bit different because we are usually approaching the culture as outsiders.
So you said that it's difficult to navigate, but how do you navigate it? Do you navigate it at all?
Yeah, so I've spent like, since I was 13, I've spent like most of my time trying to reconnect with my heritage and culture. And when I do this, it's very like textbook oriented because I don't have these cultural experiences. But because it is so textbook, I actually know a lot more about Asian culture and contemporary Asian history than like my Asian peers, or even my peers that grew up in Asia. So that's a little bit interesting. But what my process kind of looks like is it's a lot of YouTube videos, a lot of reading, a lot of documentaries and things like that. And then of course hanging out with friends and learning from them. But it's definitely learning about experiences that I have never had before, you know. My first time stepping into an Asian market, I was like 16 years old. Or I remember in like my sophomore year of high school, I was like asked why I didn't know what dim sum was, or why I had never had boba before, and I was like, these things are super foreign to me. They were never introduced to me as a child. So.
Do you feel American?
Yeah, I feel really American. I feel that my ideology is very much more on the individualistic side than the collectivist side. When it comes to like my way of thinking, I think the way my personality is very American as well. So, um, I kind of I grew up with all these American things, and when I think about my ancestry, I think about my adoptive family and their ancestry as like German Russians and stuff like that. So, um, yeah, to that was the longer format answer of that question, but
Okay.
yeah.
Um, have you experienced any racism or stereotyping?
Oh yeah, of course. I think I've been like asked if I eat my own dog, or you know, I've been asked why I don't have an ethnic name. I've been like just like countless things where it's like, can you do my math homework for me and stuff like that. Or a lot of people would assume that I do the things I do or I do them well just because I am Asian. So I am very stereotypically Asian in the way that I play violin and piano. I used to do ballet. And so I do all of these like very traditionally, stereotypically Asian activities, but it's literally just because I like them. And so a lot of people would credit me being good at art to, oh, she's just Asian. Every time I try hard in school, or like to do well in school, it would be, oh, she's just Asian. So, and that would like, they'd completely disregard like any work that I had done.
So you feel like they discredit your hard work and the fact that you're
Mm-hmm.
Asian.
Yes, for sure. Yeah. And then there's just like a lot of assumptions, like assuming that just because I look the way I do, that I've had certain cultural experiences where it's like, no, that's not necessarily the case.
Can you talk about like one specific instance?
Yeah, let me think of one. When when I moved to Florida, I got asked how I open my eyes and if I have eyelashes. Yeah, that Florida education. I also had someone be like, wait, but two white people can't make an Asian baby. And I was like, yeah, thanks for paying attention in biology. I'm adopted. And they're like, what's that? And I was like a freshman in high school. I was like, oh my God. Yeah, so some people are, I've learned over time that common sense is not as common as you might think.
What do you think about the state of Florida?
Florida is a really interesting place. I don't think it's very representative of like the whole entire United States. It's very southern. I know people say that Florida isn't the South, but there are very much parts of Florida that are very hick and very southern, in my opinion. Outside of like the snowbird culture, though, I really love how many New Yorkers there are, and particularly in Orlando, it's very diverse. There's a large Hispanic population, and also the attitude in Orlando specifically is like you could literally do anything and no one would bat an eyelash. So coming from a place like Minnesota, which is very quiet, very conservative socially, I felt very at home here. It was like you just kind of have to fend for yourself and you can do whatever you want. And like I could literally scream on the side of the road and no one would care. And I love that, no one really cares and you can just be yourself. So I think that's a really cool thing about Florida. But would I really call it home? Maybe not yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now I want to ask more about like your womanhood.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of like the intersectionality of you being a woman, but you also being Asian.
Okay.
Can you talk about that experience?
Yeah, so I think being an Asian woman has been more difficult for me just because I feel ideals for Asian women are quite different than ideals for white women. And being raised in the West, sometimes I feel like I'm more loud or I'm too masculine to be like an Asian woman, and I'm not quiet. I don't feel or I'm not diplomatic and poised, or things that are typically associated with these like Asian doll stereotypes, or the ideal Asian woman. And this has really led me to feel like, oh, Asian men specifically won't prefer me, or they won't find me very attractive, or if worried about just not really being feminine enough. I got a few comments from some people over the years that I was like really masculine, despite doing really feminine things like ballet and stuff, and not even like it that should matter. I don't think you should go and call someone that thinks that you know maybe don't really align with their gender. And so I think that really affected me psychologically. And then I was like, I don't know if I feel like enough like a woman, and being held to these standards for Asian women, I felt like I didn't fit that at all. And to me, that kind of made me feel less attractive. Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, it's all right.
Sorry. That's terrible.
Yeah, I had this person call me masculine, and like, or I had someone be like, "Oh yeah, you're not the type of girl to wear a wedding dress. You're too like manly for that." And I was like,
Oh,
"Oh my god!" And they were all white women too. I was like, "What is it with white women calling people like this?"
jeez.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to talk about like what's it like dating as an Asian woman?
Yeah. So, I personally have never dated, but I do know how men perceive me, and um, as an Asian woman, I think, or just a woman of color, you have to. If you end up liking a person, it's like, oh, does this person even like my race to begin with? Do they even like Asian women? Do they even like black women? Or do they like them too much? Because you got those men on TikTok that's like, I want a chocolate woman, or like I wanted like a Asian waifu, and you're like, ooh, get away from me. I don't want to be within like a 10-mile radius of you. Um, so because of that, I think Asian men, not Asian men, but like I think men have either thought like because I am Asian that I'll be a certain way in a relationship, or they'll have these like sort of fetishes and stuff, and it's like, oh my god, um, get away from me. So, yeah. So I think as an Asian woman, you definitely have to be really conscious of that. Asian women are like highly fetishized, especially. So they do studies, and it's like I think Asian women are the most desirable on dating apps, and Asian men are the least desirable on dating apps. Also, recently in the Asian American community, there's been like the Oxford study joke happening. So it's like if I ever like a white man, it's like, oh, it's the Oxford study. She must just hate herself and stuff. It's like, no, maybe I just like other races that aren't my own.
How long have you been making art?
Um, I've been making art forever. I think there's like a lot of people I know, they have a specific time where they got into art, whether it be like high school or middle school. I remember telling myself that I wanted to become an artist when I was in preschool at like 3 years old, and I like remember the specific moment. So I've always taken my art very seriously, and always knew I wanted to pursue something in the arts.
Okay. So As an artist now, as you've matured, can you tell me what your art is about?
My art right now deals with the contemporary dominance of East Asian culture in the 21st century, and then also the one-child policy in Chinese politics.
How do those things influence your art?
I feel like I've been growing up in a really interesting time. I think it's a really interesting time to not to be a person of color, but especially an Asian person. Within the last 10 years, like anime, K-pop, gaming, these like really big industries have like really become popular in the West, and now the West has become more open to these things. And also, the East Asian countries over the last 20 years have become extremely dominant economically as well. So I think it's a really interesting time to be Asian and to kind of experience these large scale changes societally, and how, you know, nowadays I think the fashion houses are all catering to Asian people because they're the top buyers. Or a lot of makeup trends are coming from, you know, Korea, or there's like a lot of things with skincare and things of that nature. So I think this interest in looking at Asian icons and their media, that is super interesting to me, and how it's impacting the world. So
You have these two beautiful paintings behind you. These go together, correct?
yes, it's a diptych.
Can you tell me the title of this?
Yeah, so this is called "And She Couldn't Be More Different from Me." And this actually is more race-based and more in the kind of like American area of interest or study. And I was really inspired by "The Bluest Eye" by Toni Morrison, and just kind of the way she talks about how children kind of learn to, you know, self-loathing through the lens of race specifically. So I had an experience where I liked a guy, and then he ended up with this girl, and she was white, and I was like, dang. It's like that meme where it's like, I waited 3 years, white man did it in 1 week, you know? And so I ended up making this piece, and I was thinking about how, as a woman of color, you're always compared to like the so-called purity of white women, you know, and you're always seen as the alternative or the other woman. And growing up, like up until I was 13, I actually wanted to be white. I like dreamed as a white person. All of like my like create Sims, when I played The Sims. Whenever I want to make myself, I just make myself into like an ideal blonde-haired, blue-eyed white person. And I think as women, we just always sit in the mirror, you know, comparing ourselves to another girl, you know, being like, what if I was blonder? What if I was paler? What if I, you know, had bigger eyes or smaller lips or a smaller nose? What if my nose wasn't hooked, and things like that? And so this really just speaks to, it's really a meditation on comparison. And I wanted it to be really elementary, where it's like, just like spot the difference. And I wanted to confront their viewer on their own biases, on what makes one woman more beautiful than the other. And why do we hold one woman over the other, you know? And it's not necessarily even a criticism of white women. It's a criticism of what makes that white woman better or more beautiful than all of the other women in the world. And I think there's something to be said for the fact that you can go anywhere in the world and they will probably find the white woman to be better or more beautiful than their local women, you know? And, you know, you go to a place and you don't even know if those men would like you, but you can definitely bet that they'll like find some white woman to be like just better and stuff. And I think that's kind of like the scar of colonialism and white supremacy. So
Wow, that was very beautiful.
thank you.
And it really helps to hear you explain it because I see it now. Is that all you had to say about your art?
Yeah, because I think these ones don't necessarily have to do with that.
We could talk about those too if you want.
Yeah. So a lot of my other art explores either like interpersonal relationships or just politics on all levels. So there's politics within the self, there's politics within interpersonal relationships, and there's politics, of course, on the large scale. So I did a series of paintings of these couples and how they may interact with the world that is in political turmoil. I find that when there is political turmoil, we tend to cling to those that are closest to us. And, you know, I wanted to explore how people interact with that and interact with each other, protecting each other. Sometimes it's that one person that gets you to the next day. And that's kind of what that is about. But with my other work, like my protest, They Failed Us First, which is this one right here, that talks specifically to the, speaks specifically to the nature of protest and the idea that the Chinese government failed their girls. You know, I get asked why I'm not Chinese enough or why I don't know Chinese and stuff. And my answer is they failed us first. The Chinese government is the reason why I'm not in China right now and living a Chinese life. So, and this painting is really for every girl that is being failed by her government, or just people in general being failed by their governments. They're failing us first. So
there's a little frame, and They Failed Us First. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so a lot of times I either include like a loop, like a kind of a semicircle, or a box. And for me, if you look at the fundamental quality of a line, is it connects 2 points, and then it also creates a border. And so I look at a line as a method of connection, but also protection. So for me, the box is like, it connects those girls, but it's also a protection. You know, no, you can't come in the box. You know, they're safe from you, and it creates a border between you and the person. So, in the subject matter, and with that loop, usually they can turn into like a much larger circle, and it kind of shows that their connection is much larger than themselves, or it kind of really connects to the red string of fate as well.
Okay. As an artist, where do you see yourself in the future? Like, what are your hopes and dreams? Where do you want to be?
Ideally, I would like to be represented by a gallery and making my own work and selling it. If not, I've got some other alternatives too. I'm really interested in teaching, and I'm also really interested in like graphic design and marketing and things like that.
Okay. What message do you have for the world? What do you want people to know about you? Give me something. Be inspirational.
Inspirational?
Yeah.
That's hard. I think the current situation in the world is like really crappy. So my little bit of advice is be kind. You know, you never know what people are going through. And, you know, my mom always says you can make or break someone's day. So why not just, make it, and choose to be kind? Because I think sometimes the one kind thing can get you through the day, or just remind you of really good things. And when times are really hard, it's really easy to get down, of course, but trying to remember the quality of like all human beings and being kind and having empathy, I think that'll get you pretty far. So, yeah.
That was very beautiful.
Thank
Thank you so
you.
much.
Thank you so much.